Sunset Song is a 1932 coming-of-age novel by the Scottish author Grassic Gibbon. It's often described as one of the best Scottish novels of the 20th century, but in fact it's probably also one of the best English language novels of that period. Nevertheless, it's far less well known, and the quality of its writing and the importance of its themes might lead one to expect. I'll hazard some guesses as to why later. Grassic Gibbon was a pseudonym, but we'll stick with it. He was born into a farming family in Aberdeenshire in 1901. In early adulthood, he became a journalist, then joined the Royal Service Corps in 1919 and the RAF in 1923, serving in both capacities in the Middle East and India. After his marriage in 1925, he settled in Hertfordshire, where he died a decade later of peritonitis at the age of just 33. Sunset Song is about a farming community in Kincardineshire in the early decades of the 20th century, as seen through the eyes of a character called Chris Guthrie as she grows into a young woman. The community inhabits the fictional parish of Kinraddy. In addition to Chris, several characters are pivotal. Chai Strachan, a socialist, Long Rob, the miller and a pacifist, Ewan Tavendale, a young farmer who eventually marries Chris, and John Guthrie, Chris's tyrannical father, who dies halfway through the novel. But the whole community is clearly represented, and each individual is distinguishable throughout. The story divides roughly into two parts, corresponding to Chris's life before and after the death of her father. John Guthrie is something of a monster. He neglectfully manoeuvres his wife into taking her own life. He severely beats his son, Chris's brother, and when he's paralysed, just before he dies, he demands sex from his daughter. Nevertheless, when he does die, Chris, for all the relief she feels, finds herself crying at his funeral. The second part of the novel is much more varied, partly because Chris is finally free to be herself, but also because of the greater depth of its themes. In part one, we've seen how brutal and unforgiving rural life can be. Gibbon never sentimentalises it, but part two deals with the coming and going of the First World War. I've said in another video that I don't think a straightforward anti-war novel is possible, but Sunset Song may be as close as it's possible to get. Everything takes place on the home front, so there are no trench scenes or poison gas or disemboweled young soldiers. What we get instead is group hysteria, propagandistic lies, a community turning on itself, young men going off to fight and either coming back broken or brutalized, or not at all, and the entire economy moving to a war footing of short-term gains and environmental destruction. It's partly those gains which eventually undermine Kinraddy, as its forests are cut down and some of its members become dubiously rich overnight. If Sunset Song sounds like a grim novel, it isn't. What lightens it is Chris's voice. She speaks throughout in her own idiom, which includes, as Gibbon points out in his introductory note, some score or so of untranslatable words, and her optimism. The descriptions of the landscape are poetic and affecting. The wet fields squelched below her feet, oozing up their smell of red clay from under the sodden grasses, and up in the hills she saw the trail of the mist, great sailing shapes of it, going south on the wind into Forfar. And in fact, without giving anything away, the novel ends relatively happily. So why is it not better known? I think three interconnected reasons. Firstly, it sounds grim and remote, a story of rural Highlanders in the lead-up to World War I. Secondly, Gibbon's score or so of untranslatable words. Combined with a very slow start to the novel, nearly 30 pages of backstory, that can feel like a lot of work. Most readers are willing to persevere if they think there'll be a payoff, but with a novel that's relatively obscure to begin with, they may be more likely to throw in the towel. It's a kind of vicious circle, in other words. However, this is a novel that gets better and better as it goes on. Technically, it's the first part of a trilogy called A Scots Quair, but it's entirely satisfactory in itself. I'm pretty sure it's only a matter of time until it's as well known as Side with Rosie or Lark Rise, to both of which, incidentally, it's significantly superior.